Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of Trade Advice here on the SFS channel. This is our Week 11 rendition, and of course, as always, all of your questions, all the trade scenarios and advice you need in your respective fantasy leagues are welcome down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to each and every single one of you guys throughout the week, and especially within the first 24, 36 hours of posting this episode. We'll be getting back to mostly all of you guys that put those questions and those scenarios down in the comment section below, because we always try to be the most interactive fantasy football channel here on YouTube. So today, again, we've got our weekly stock market watch for the fantasy football world, looking at buy, sell, and hold trade candidates and assessing these situations. And we'll even break down a couple of different players who I think their trade situation varies depending on the state of your fantasy team, your lineups, and your records here as we approach fantasy playoff season. So with that being said, if you're new around here to the SFS channel, you got to drop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on. Join the community. Make sure you know what's up. Watch the videos every day. We put out a ton of content every week. And again, try to be super interactive with all of you guys on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. And then drop down and all of you guys give this video a thumbs up before we get started. Thank you guys so much. Let's hit the intro and get right in to our first piece of trade advice here for Week 11. Alrighty, kicking off today's episode, we've got a lot of running backs, 3 big hitters right at the top of the list for this episode. But again, please put those trade situations in the comment section below. That'll be just as useful, if not more useful, than soaking up the information in today's episode. And if the chances are that I get back to you, and that should be a large percentage of the comments down there, hopefully I'm able to guide you in the right direction for your trades this week. We post this video weekly here on the channel, so something to definitely stop by next week and check out as well. But Nick Chubb here for the Cleveland Browns in a large assortment of situations here. I am looking to sell, especially in PPR leagues, even in some standard situations as well. The reasoning here is simply, I think that the Week 9 performance, the last time we saw Nick Chubb on the field, he was out with COVID this past week, and Diontae Johnson was able to step up and fulfill the starting role for Cleveland's backfield. I think that 28.5 point game in half PPR Week 9 will equate to be Nick Chubb's ceiling and highest production output performance of this season. The reasoning for that is he didn't have Kareem Hunt in the backfield. He's been on the injured reserve. His return is looming. He could come back anytime between now, Week 11, and Week 14. That was the initial timeline and time frame that we received for him upon the injury of his calf. Again, it's no guarantee whether he'll be in or out of the lineup this week. There's a chance, but nothing is for sure at this point in time. Now, when Kareem Hunt returns to the backfield, that essentially means Nick Chubb's going to have next to no receiving involvement. We saw him make a couple receptions in that game, which is still out of character for Nick Chubb, who is not a very involved pass catcher in this offense. And then we're going to see some of that goal line touchdown vulturing, which was very, very detrimental to Chubb's overall ceiling throughout the first dang near half of the year prior to Kareem Hunt's injury. So that's going to be a big deal for this offense. And I think that when you talk about a player whose trajectory isn't headed upwards, but rather downwards for the rest of the season, that's a red flag and a warning sign, a reason to panic. So Nick Chubb looking to move off of him in most situations. Aaron Jones, I'm going to make this abundantly clear and preface some information immediately after I say this. But if there's a time to buy Aaron Jones, it would be right now while his stock is down. We dodged a bullet. He got out of the woods with basically the best case scenario for what a twisted up knee could result in. That being a 1 to 2 week MCL sprain injury. Sounds like everything's going to be all right. It sounds like we don't have any long-term concerns to be worried about here. And that's where this opportunity arises from, because there's going to be some desperate teams with the state of the point in the season we're at right now, just being the running back position in general and the scarcity we have with the players at our fingertips to use in our lineups weekly. Some teams that are in the hunt for the playoffs and need big wins now are not going to be able to sit around and be patient for Aaron Jones to come back and score points for them. They need to have a level of assurance and a level of confidence in the players they're putting into their lineups today in Week 11. So there's an opportunity for you to go buy Aaron Jones off of those teams. This is certainly someone who has top 12 running back capabilities when he comes back. But the main thing I want to make abundantly clear here is do not, of all the players we love buying here on the SFS channel, Aaron Jones is someone I am extremely cautious of overpaying for. And that's because I don't think he has the elite upside that was once attributed to his fantasy profile. And I don't think his upside is quite what it once was. You talk about the RB2 season he had in 2019, even the RB5 or 6, depending on your scoring format numbers he had last year in 2020. I don't think he's quite that same player anymore. The explosive runs have been coming less and less frequently. The goal line carries and the touchdown count has been down as it relates to those two seasons. And there's just some other elements in play, whether it's A.J. Dillon's involvement in the backfield, his usage on the goal line, his usage in the passing game, that's eating into Aaron Jones' overall fantasy stock. So while if you're a team looking to add a strong second or third running back piece to your team to make that lineup really bolstered and ready for playoff fantasy football, this is a deal I think you can go out and make. And again, try and help another team who's looking for some depth or distribution of points throughout their lineups. But again, I'm being very cautious of Aaron Jones here, because I think A.J. Dillon is a bigger indictment on his overall fantasy upside the rest of this season. The last of the big three players I initially touched on at the top of today's episode is Christian McCaffrey, obviously of the Carolina Panthers, one of the biggest names in fantasy football on a year-to-year basis. I'm going to start off telling you here what I would not be doing with CMC, and then we'll get into a couple of the different situations for various teams out there. So the first thing I'm not doing with Christian McCaffrey down the stretch here is going out and buying for him. Just the name value and price tag associated with CMC in fantasy, due to how astronomical that is, there's a few things at play that give me some pause, some hesitation, and reason to believe that his best games of the season may not be coming while we're expecting the top-end performance from him and when we need it the most, obviously, in the fantasy playoff season. Christian McCaffrey's got a pretty tough schedule down the rest of the way. He's got Tampa Bay twice in 3 weeks between week 16 and 18, so if you're a team finishing off your season in the last week of the NFL regular season, this in particular applies even more to you because you're getting one of the toughest opposing rushing defensive matchups coming your way. Now, does this in any stretch of the imagination mean that Christian McCaffrey is a sittable player in those games? Absolutely not. Christian McCaffrey provides far too much in the receiving game. He gives you too much floor value just as a pass catcher to ever think about sitting him down. But in terms of you getting the top-end performances out of McCaffrey in those big-time games, that's not the matchups that I would expect that from. And I think there's going to be some limitation in touchdown dependency in those two contests, in particular, again, against Tampa Bay. The other thing that worries me here is the hamstring injury. And now CMC missed 5 games due to that issue. He was seen working on the hamstring on the sideline during the game. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to impact CMC moving forward. But that is something that at least is in the back of my mind and that I frequently worry about. To begin with, Christian McCaffrey's initial hamstring injury was not contact related, and he just simply pulled up on it and went to the sideline in that initial contest. What was that, 5-6 weeks ago now? So I've got my concerns and my hesitancies about his health to begin with, and he did also have, I believe it was Matt Rule said that he had a injury designation for his head in the second half of that matchup. So CMC might have got bonked out there. Sounds like he's going to be fine. I would expect him to play this week. But overall, again, for that big ticket price you would have to pay for a Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to hold off on buying him. And in some situations, and again, this goes back to that risk factor, the tough matchups. In some situations, if your team needs more point distribution and more dependable production across your lineup spread out as opposed to concentration in one player and being dependent on that one asset, in this case being Christian McCaffrey, I might actually look to sell CMC for 2 strong lineup plays. If you can get yourself an RB1 type deal like a DeAndre Swift who's out here catching a lot of passes, and a very strong wide receiver too, or you can get yourself a Najee Harris and some form of wide receiver 2 or flex level player if you can get a package in return for McCaffrey, if you're one of those teams that really, really needs some help and some depth distribution through that starting lineup, selling is a potential option to explore. Now, this isn't some immediate panic, smashing the red buttons and getting McCaffrey out of house as quickly as possible. But I think of the elite fantasy running backs we have right now, that schedule and the fact that you just feel a little bit icky at the end of the week and a little bit cautious and relatively unsafe in terms of the dependability Christian McCaffrey's health will give you on a week-to-week basis. He's not someone I'm looking to go again, pay that big ticket price for, and is someone who I would entertain trade offers for. That doesn't mean, again, I'm hurrying up to try and sell him. Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, our first wide receiver in today's episode, is someone I am absolutely going out to buy. He's got 8.5 points or more in half PPR scoring in every single one of his 8 starts this year. He is the new age Allen Robinson, or maybe not new age, but he is this season's Allen Robinson in terms of just giving you uber dependable numbers week in and week out. The floor is fantastic. Now, he doesn't have a super elite ceiling. He's currently only the wide receiver 23 because he's not putting up gaudy numbers in any games here because Pittsburgh doesn't really pass downfield consistently. But he's wide receiver 23 right now. And again, you're getting super good production floor. I said 8.5 is his floor. That's his lowest production output. That was against Chicago a couple weeks back. You'll take that almost every time in a half PPR league. I mean, you're telling me that's his worst output of the season. When we see these games down the stretch of seasons, your uber boom weeks that we were seeing weeks 1 through 5, maybe even weeks 6, 7, 8, those insane and astronomical numbers are tending to regress here as defenses in the NFL are stepping up their game. They've got more tape on offenses, and the offensive productivity on a per-game basis for a lot of teams is actually on the decline. Now, that's not the case for every NFL team out there, but certainly NFL defenses, as the weather gets colder, again, as they have more tape, more experience, they've got more chemistry together working on the field, they start to have more effectiveness against opposing offenses. And when you're talking about some of these boom or bust players, they might start having more bust performances. I chose to pivot my word choice there. They might start having more frequent bust games, and as a result, those can be killer in fantasy matchups. Having a strong floor asset like a Diontae Johnson in your fantasy lineup is something that's going to be very, very important. And having that level of dependability and comfortability, knowing Diontae is going to walk out there, score X amount of points per week, and get the job done for you, that's one less thing you've got to worry about in your lineups. Again, 8.5 points or more every game this season. In 6 of his 8 performances, he is 10 or more points. So very, very good things from Diontae Johnson. He's one of the most dependable players in fantasy lineups this year. A.J. Brown, despite the past 2 weeks, the struggles of production, I'm still looking to go out and buy him. So we've got not too many holds in today's episode. We'll get into our first hold. We've got a lot of ors in today's video because as fantasy teams and situations, and as they're, you've got 7-3 teams, and then you've got yourself 4-6 teams. You've got to find a balance, and not everything is going to work for every team. So different situations for different teams. But A.J. Brown, in general, I'm overwhelmingly buying him as opposed to, I suppose if you're buying, you're going to hold these players as well if you're already owners. But I am not selling on A.J. Brown. I'm not panicking on him for the rest of this season. I love the schedule he's got for the final 4 weeks of the fantasy season, and I love the situation he has in Tennessee. We've talked about this the last couple of weeks. He's been up against tough opposing rushing defenses, and when that is the case, in particular the last 2 weeks here, that makes Tennessee one-dimensional. Derrick Henry was so valuable to A.J. Brown and his fantasy value because when the play-action pass game gets set up, A.J. Brown now has the opportunity to make explosive splash plays over the top and hit opposing defenses deep down the field. That hasn't been the case. They could not run the ball against the Saints last week. They narrowly defeated them, but they weren't able to have super efficient numbers or to keep the ball moving there. And then with Marshawn Lattimore, he's a pretty dang solid and competent corner himself. He's not going to let A.J. Brown just run right past him. So Brown here, though, in his upcoming matchups, He's got Houston this week in Week 11. That's a very, very exploitable matchup if you ask me. New England in Week 12, that might be a bit more of a tough situation. You might see some more of those lackluster numbers Bill likes to take away opposing offense's top options. A.J. Brown, to me, looks like that for Tennessee right now without the running game really coming together yet. And then after that, after you escape from the Week 12 darkness that is that New England Patriots matchup, you get yourself Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and Miami. All teams I think A.J. Brown can have very successful matchups against. And in those performances, I think he is one of the wide receiver ones in terms of being a top 12 fantasy player for me the rest of the season, with one of the easiest rest of season schedules after that Week 12 marker. A.J. Dillon now, so getting into that next player that has two potential situations. You know, we talked about having the 7-3 team and then the 4-6 team and the different needs that those two fantasy rosters might have. If you're a team that needs very, very quality running back production today and you can't wait or potentially package up a deal to go improve your lineup for tomorrow, hence weeks in the future here, then maybe you need to hold on to A.J. Dillon. With Aaron Jones out of the lineup for the next 1 to 2 weeks, the numbers I expect from A.J. Dillon are borderline top 12 in the next 2 games. I think he's going to be right in the RB1 mix for, again, those individual game scopes here. But you're talking about a back who has the opportunity and the skill set to be a 3-down workhorse. Green Bay doesn't have anyone else on this roster. They already lost their third stringer, Kylan Hill, their rookie 7th round pick, to an ACL tear. So you're already talking about a very thin running back room. The Packers are actually bringing in players off the streets to have practice squad tryouts and try and figure out who their number 2 back is going to be for this game. But A.J. Dillon's going to handle all the work in the receiving game. I mean, there might be a few touches distributed to Patrick Taylor, but A.J. Dillon's going to be seeing the bulk of the receptions, the bulk of the rushing attempts, and I would expect virtually all of the goal line carries this week against Minnesota. And if he gets the opportunity next week against the Rams, the 49ers just laid out on a silver platter that if you play smash mouth football and keep their offense off the field and try to impose your will on them physically, this is a defense that wants to rush the passer. They want to make you get into situations where you have to throw the football. A.J. Dillon's a great back to send out there, wear the defense down for 3.5 quarters, and then finish that game off. So I really like this opportunity with Aaron Jones out. Again, if you were able to find A.J. on the waiver wire or just have him stashed on your bench, you're looking at borderline top 12 numbers out of him the next individual 2 weeks. I think that that's something that could be a real league saver for a lot of teams out there that are dire for running back help. The other situation here, though, is that you're a team with a ton of depth. You maybe just aren't even an Aaron Jones owner, and you've got, and I would say especially aren't an Aaron Jones owner. In that case, I think you might want to hold on to A.J. Dillon as well. But maybe you've just got a ton of depth at running back. Maybe you drafted super well, made some good trades throughout the season, and he's frankly not going to see your lineup here in the next 2 games. Package up A.J. Dillon, maybe a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and try and send him to another team who is one of those 4-6, 5-5 teams really needing some RB help this week. Help them out in the short term, take one of their options and their assets for the long-term game, and boom, set yourself up for success down the stretch of the season. Rhamondre Stevenson, another similar situation, but in this case, I'm going to lean more towards sell in each situation here because it sounds like Damian Harris is going to be back sooner rather than later. Now, again, we don't officially have word. I'm going to say that officially in quotation marks because we truly don't know. And while he was able to return to practice and hang out during the walkthrough period for the Thursday night contest, it is a short week, a short turnaround. Damian Harris obviously in the concussion protocol, as was Rhamondre Stevenson, who was able to clear it this past week. Stevenson's going to lose the job as soon as Harris is able to come back. And although Rhamondre was fantastic, averaged 5 yards per carry, had 20 carries, 100 yards rushing, tossed in, 4 grabs, 14 yards, and had those 2 touchdowns. I loved him coming out of Oklahoma. I think his skill set is fantastic, and I think that Bill, when he wants to use Stevenson, has got himself a really nice 3-down back here. He can catch the ball a little bit as well. That's not necessarily going to be the case, though. This is Damian Harris's backfield. I mean, maybe Rhamondre earned himself a few more touches on a per-game basis, but his ceiling or his upside, rather, neither his ceiling or his upside, but his fantasy trade stock, rather, will probably never be higher this season. So go out, try and make a deal for him. Again, acquire one of those names that you can use long-term, whether that's a Michael Carter who has a tough schedule, catches passes as a starting running back for a team in this league, a Javonte Williams who also has a super easy schedule, and he's got the opportunity to potentially increase his touches down the stretch of this season. We'll see what happens, though, with him and Melvin Gordon. Those are two names I would look to see if you can get with Rhamondre Stevenson on the move in your leagues. Brandon Aiyuk back into the wide receiver market now. Aiyuk's a player who, this is going to be the final name we talk about today. Again, leave those questions down in the comment section below. We'll get back to as many of you as possible, but I am not panicked whatsoever about his performance last week. Frankly, it was very disappointing. Obviously, it was not the numbers we were hoping for. I like to think that if the 49ers had a little bit more of a pass-centric view on this contest, I think Brandon Aiyuk would have done very well. Just the eye test, watching him on TV, I was watching him literally tip the cornerbacks over that he was running routes against. But Jimmy G was taking sacks, checking the ball down. Jimmy did step up in the pocket and make a few impressive throws to Deebo Samuel, but Brandon Aiyuk was finding separation, getting open in that game. Just clearly they were more focused on running the football because they had a great game plan, and they figured out how to exploit the weaknesses of this Rams team, and that worked for them. What did they win? 31-7, I want to say it was, and they looked fantastic while doing it. So Aiyuk, though, his routes looked very crisp, still looks very healthy. The matchups are just amazing here down the stretch of this season. And in these games when they're maybe not so afraid to throw the ball so much, and I don't blame them when you've got Aaron Donald, Von Miller, Leonard Floyd rushing the passer, Ramsey on the back end. I mean, I don't know if I want to throw the ball too much either. But Aiyuk's got Jacksonville, Minnesota, Seattle, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston in matchups where he is basically going to be matched up against the number 2 corner for all of those teams because Deebo Samuel draws the number 1 attention from him. So it's been a rough year for Brandon Aiyuk, but I've seen really, really impressive, really, really encouraging things from him on the field. We've seen the stats 2 of the last 3 weeks be up here. This is someone that I'm still continuing to have confidence in here, and I think can end off the season pretty strong. Alrighty, one more time. That was our fantasy trade advice for Week 11 here with our buy, sell, and hold candidates for this week. If you've got those questions, drop them down in the comment section below. We'll be able to answer a lot more and to address a lot more of you guys than just the players that we talked about in today's episode if you guys shoot those questions down there for me. So thank you guys so much for stopping by. Leave today's episode with a like before you head on out, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.